It's almost.
It's not 5 yet.
Thank you.
Which clock?
Sorry.
You go by?
Oh,
computer.
Computer, I don't know. You never know. It's like when you have a cell phone and one person's like 1 minute off.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Thank you. This is great. Thank you.
Ready? Cool. We'll call this meeting to order, and we will start with roll call.
Sure.
Councilmember San Antonio,
Present.
Councilmember Schaefer,
Here.
Councilmember O'Hara,
Present.
Deputy Mayor Lyons,
Here.
Mayor Ehlers.
Here.
Record will show all members of the council are present tonight.
Okay, this is a special meeting of the Encinitas City Council, scheduled for February 26, 2025 at 5 p.m. And the item on the for this special meeting was item 8H from our meeting later, but in the spirit of trying to get done at a better hour, we moved this to its separate meeting so we can have a good, thorough discussion about it without delaying, taking too long into the evening. And this item is the fiscal year 2024 mid-year budget status report and proposed budget amendments. And with that, just go straight to staff. If we can have a staff report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Tom Gallup, Interim Finance Director, and with me is Kelly Sanderson, Finance Manager, Budget Officer, and we will be presenting the mid-year budget status report and proposed amendments for the fiscal year 2024-25 operating and capital improvement program budgets. Also in attendance are department directors and staff who are also available to answer any questions that you may have. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the current fiscal year operating budget and submit recommendations for additional budget amendments. It might be helpful to start with a brief overview of where this report fits within our overall budget cycle. The city's annual budget begins several months prior to the adoption and continues into the following fiscal year. Staff currently is working on these mid-year adjustments, next year council strategy, and updating long-term forecast to prepare for the public workshops in the spring. The mid-year report compares budget to actuals as well as past results to provide context and evaluate overall financial performance. This process helps staff identify trends that could impact future operations and demonstrates transparency by sharing findings. Staff revises revenue projections and expenditures to provide a more realistic picture that will assist the city in preparing the upcoming fiscal year operating and capital budgets. Mid-year amendments are generally submitted along with updated revenue and expenditure forecasts to help ensure that adequate funding sources are identified prior to recommending additional appropriations. After 6 months of activity, fiscal year 2024-25 revenues are expected to exceed estimates by year end, and budgeted expenditures are anticipated to be less than budgeted. The proposed mid-year budget adjustments for all funds will increase estimated revenue by $2.7 million, increase budgeted expenses by $0.9 million, and increase budgeted interfund transfers for a net $0.8 million. Transfers reflect project closures and returns along with proposed appropriations to two existing capital projects. In general, proposed amendments increase revenue to align with actuals, increase cost recovery revenue and expense, and reflect cost sharing within enterprise funds. While the Finance Department reviews all funds at mid-year, the budget status report focuses on the general fund, which is the city's largest and most discretionary fund. And that's responsible for funding operations, debt service, and capital improvements via both direct expenditures and transfers to other city funds. The following budget adjustments for the general fund will increase estimated revenue by $0.2 million, or $200,000. Increase budgeted expenditures by $0.4 million. Increase net transfers by $0.3 million, including $0.12 million of transfers in from closed capital and work projects, and $0.45 million capital transfers out to the Capital Improvement Fund 401 for requested increases to the Annual Storm Drain Repairs Project, CS 25A, and the North Highway 101 Drainage Project, CD 23A. This will result in a net $0.5 million or $500,000 decrease in budgetary unassigned fund balance. The budget continues to remain balanced with all priorities funded. And I will now turn the presentation over to Kelly, who will talk about general fund revenues and expenditures.
Thank you. I will summarize some of the analysis included in the staff report and that provides context for some of the amendments as well. The general fund revenues at December 31st are $40.6 million or 38% of estimated revenue. While this isn't 50%, we're on track because historical trends show that actual revenues for the prior 3 years range between 38 and 40% of the budget at mid-year. This is consistent with prior years where actuals reflect the timing of county property tax and state sales tax disbursements. Attachment 4 of the packet zooms into the 6-month activity in the general fund through December 31st. It provides our separate revenue sources, original budget, revised budget, the actuals for 6 months, budget variances, and then also the increases that are proposed in the exhibit to the budget resolution. Property tax and transient occupancy tax increases are proposed to align the budget with actuals that we've received. Sales tax has a proposed budget decrease to align with revised projections, which are showing 2024 as a down year statewide. Recent reductions to the federal funds rates aren't expected to help until later in 2025. Excise tax is a new revenue source that's related to the retail cannabis. Mid-year actuals total $0.4 million or 60% of estimated revenue, with receipts reflecting July through November 24 reporting periods. We're proposing a budget increase to align this new source with actual receipts. This is also the first year that we have all 4 permitted sites that are in operations. So we feel that the increase is still conservative as we learn to see if there's any cyclical variance or see what those trends are. Licenses and permits has an increase of $209,000. This is because the original budget adopted on June 12th did not include a new outdoor dining public right-of-way usage fee that was approved that same night. So this $209,000 reflects the receipts that we've received this year for that new source. Other revenue typically offsets related expenditures. This category primarily consists of cost recovery for fire strike team reimbursements, third-party special events, or facility rentals. A budget increase is needed to reflect federal and state fire strike team reimbursements, and so we'll also see increases in those related expenditures. In other funds, there are also development impact fee revenue being adjusted to align with actuals. This allows us, as we go into the budget workshops, to project out where we think those funds will land towards the end of the year to inform what can be appropriated in the next fiscal year. So that's why we are adjusting those, or recommending adjustments. On the expenditure side, general fund expenditures are $46.5 million, or 46% of budgeted appropriations. Historical trends show the actuals in the prior 3 years range between 39 and 48% at mid-year. So this is consistent with prior years, with recurring expenditures being less than 50%, largely due to the timing of the law enforcement contract when we received the invoices from the sheriff. So most of our tax revenue comes in the second half of the year, and our sheriff contract, we pay more revenue, we pay more invoices in the second half of the year as well. So similar to revenue, the attachment 4 provides more detail on 6 months of general fund expenditure activity. It's presented by the function and the different divisions within each department, and then it's also summarized by type. These adjustments generally reflect contract changes, price increases, or other unanticipated activities, or just unknown amounts that we don't know in the budget cycle. So the best example of that is the fire overtime for strike teams, where the personnel expenses go up, and then we have the cost recovery that we budget once that is known as well. And then I'll turn it back over to Tom to talk about the proposed capital changes.
Thank you, Kelly. In addition to closing completing projects and returning funding to the funding sources, staff is proposing 2 new capital budget appropriations totaling $450,000. As mentioned earlier, $250,000 to the CD 25A annual storm drain repairs project, which was not funded in the fiscal year 24-25 budget, and $200,000 to the CD 23A North Highway 101 drainage to replenish the contingency for that project. In addition to proposed budget amendments, staff is also proposing 3 reclassifications of existing positions that can be absorbed within the fiscal year 24-25 budget. If approved, increased costs of approximately $18,000 would be included in the fiscal year 26, next year's personnel budget. The FTE count will remain the same at 250.4 FTE total. With that, staff recommends that council reviews and files the report and adopts resolutions 2025-19 and 2025-28. This concludes our presentation. Staff is now available to answer questions.
Okay, we'll do any preliminary questions, and then do we have public speakers? We do not. Okay, so we'll do questions. I have some preliminary questions I'll start with, and then I see Deputy Mayor Lyons has punched in too. First question was on page 21, I think you had it on one of your, page 21 of the report, but you also had a slide that had that, but why don't you go to page 21? And it shows that we're, the fund balance, this is the general fund, the big one, and it shows the fund balance as of July 1st, 2024, but then the first 2 items look to be transactions that should have occurred before that, yet they're getting pulled off the unassigned balance. I'm trying to make sense of that. Shouldn't, if we start with a fund balance on 7/1, shouldn't that include a 624 ledger entry? And maybe there's some delay in that, or maybe maybe it got recorded later.
This is typical as we're going through the budget discussions. You are adopting the budget for fiscal year 25. So even though that was approved on the 12th, it's not going to happen until fiscal year 25. So those discussions,
okay.
They didn't come out of the 24 budget because we were adopting the budget for 25.
So the subtlety was the check hadn't cleared. It arrived on the 12th. It
Yeah.
hadn't cleared out of the, so I just wanted to make sure the 11,248,000 has not had that transaction already included in, and this was the second time. Yeah.
Correct.
And so, okay. Next question was, on page 6, there was the comment about the capital outlay was $0.1 million, $100,000, and that was 91% of expenditures. And that just seems like a really low number for 6 months of capital outlay. What, are we not spending any money in I'm not that I'm complaining, but I want to make sure I understand that number.
Yeah, typically when we budget in department operating budgets for capital outlay, those are items that are over 10,000, which are considered capital assets, but they don't meet any of our requirements or the definition of the vehicles, the equipment, the fire apparatus that we budget for in our replacement funds or in other funds. So those will be smaller items typically within a specialized budget.
So that's not all capital, that's just departmental capital outlay, which is
exactly
smaller.
Yes.
Okay. That explains it right there.
So an example I saw in the budget was a pot for tar. That's something that goes along, for
Okay.
part of the streets,
Yeah.
but it's not the actual equipment that's in the equipment replacement fund or the capital improvement projects, what
So
are sharing those funds.
it amortizes as capital and it's not expensed, so therefore it's capital, but it's, okay, that explained, it just didn't make sense to me. I knew we'd bought other things much larger, but that would be in the pure capital. Okay, great.
Exactly.
And then last question of clarification would be the FEMA disaster reimbursement that we had talked about almost 2 years ago, probably put in for it a year ago, expected it, if it was going to come to happen. Have we heard yes, no, or have we not heard?
It's my understanding from the fire department that it is still under review by FEMA. It has taken some time. I think it's under environmental review.
Oh, okay. But
Yeah.
that's in potentially several $1 million that could come back and go into the unassigned general fund. And boy, knowing that before we get into the budget cycle would be really good. So
Yeah.
anything the fire department could do to help that along or get us a status on it would be helpful. So with that, I'll yield and recognize Deputy Mayor Lyons.
Thank you, Mayor Ehlers. I have a question on a detail of wording on page 9 of 30. And it's towards the end of the page. It's the summary of the additional drainage and storm drain request. So the way it reads is, additionally, the engineering department is requesting budget amendments for the following projects that were not funded during fiscal year 24-25 budget discussions. It's my understanding that those two, SD 25A and SD 23A, actually were funded in 24-25. This would be additional funding. So could you help clarify? Maybe I'm incorrect.
Yes, it is an additional appropriation, and I can look at whether there was an appropriation in 25, but this would be an additional appropriation.
So sometimes accounting words elude me a bit. So when you say appropriated, we have our capital improvement program activity that was provided here on the desk. CD 25A and CD 23A are both identified under the drainage type, under the type drainage.
Yes, so
Does that mean that's what we've appropriated this year?
So this is a good opportunity to explain the layout of this report, maybe.
Thank
So that first line, CD 25A, typically we have, council has put $250,000 towards annual drainage repairs. So as you can see, for fiscal year 24-25, the adopted budget there is 0. So there was no funding, no appropriation towards annual storm drain. So then, as we've come through, finish the year, see what fund balance is available, because that thing that typically has been funded was not selected last year. We're requesting that be funded now because the fund balance is available.
Would that be the same interpretation for 23A? Slightly different?
Slightly different. So for 23A, that is contingency on the additional 60-inch drainage pipe work we have going on the 101. When we were able to fund that drainage work, we were just barely able to squeak by the exact dollar amount the contractor told us it would take to do that. And then at that meeting, we talked about if there's available funding at mid-year, we'll be able to add the contingency. So when they're out there, if they run into any problems, then we'll have contingency available to solve those problems. If we don't use this money, it'll return back to the general fund.
Thanks for the clarification.
And if I can hop in real quick, one added clarification, we've typically done the 250,000 per year, and then my first year, we actually doubled it and went to 500,000. Then last year, somehow we missed it, and it was zero. So it's really averaging 250,000. That may explain the 250,000 balance there today, is the fact that the year before we doubled it. So this would restore this year to 250, so we'd go a history of 250, 500, 250, and then whatever we do for next year and next year's budget. So
Yes,
with
and-
that, I'll recognize Councilmember O'Hara. O'Hara.
This is really helpful, thank you. Quick question, I missed the summarization of the impact fees and the adjustments. Could you just go over that one more time for me? I know we're changing the impact fees going forward, but I'd like to just go back through that.
Sure. I think you can actually see it on the page we have here on the screen as well. So when we're looking at, these are capital. Let me go up. Here we go. The operating adjustments. So Fund 231 is park development fees. When we were analyzing the activity through December and seeing if any adjustments would be needed throughout the remainder of the year, it looked like we could increase that 186,000 based on actual receipts this year. One of the items that City Council adopts when you actually adopt the budget is a schedule of each of these funds saying this is where we start, we're doing revenue, expenses, going out to capital, and this is where we think we'll land at the end of the budget year. So by increasing these now, that gets us to where we think we'll land at the end of the year of fiscal year 25, so that then you'll be able to make an informed decision about what's available to include, that's on the table for your budget for FY26. So
Got it.
it's, even though it actually happened, it's not in the budget yet because it wasn't, then this puts it in the budget to make the actuals and the budget align.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation. So I had a question about, I guess this kind of goes back to Bruce's question about the $250,000, and Joyce's question as well. When we allocate that, why do we always allocate $250,000? Why don't we allocate $100,000, which is essentially our barrier to having to ask for dollars, and ask more frequently? In my experience, when companies know there's money there, they spend it.
Thank you. So for storm drain repairs, this is how we fix sinkholes and things like that. So this year already, we have 2 failed pipes that we're putting a design together to address. Additionally, if there were more funding available, we'd be able to proactively line our corrugated metal pipes or replace our corrugated metal pipes so that we don't have these sinkholes popping up.
So I guess my question is why we do $250,000 on those as opposed to asking for more frequently? Or is a repair always $250,000?
No, it just allows us to be more nimble, to have that money available.
I think I'll address this more.
Okay.
But when you're done, but I can wait. Oh, if I can interject, I've had this discussion because historically I think we did 250. My first year on here, I think I prevailed in that we got 500 in discussions with Jill and her staff. In order to, and I think you used the term fix sinkholes, and my goal is to avoid sinkholes, and I think you went there. We had a discussion where we probably need, over the course of 5 to 10 years, several million a year, 1 to 2, I think were the numbers you quoted me, to get ahead. So the fundamental about our 50 to 60-year-old corrugated metal pipes is that they're rusting and they're starting to collapse. And when they collapse, you see the sinkholes like Lake Drive, et cetera. That year, I think we spent it's 2 years ago now, two seasons ago, $3.7 million in sinkhole repairs, and that included the big Lake Drive not fiasco, but calamity. And so the idea is we should probably be putting more money in right now, and this is a question that'll come up at budgeting, in order to get ahead, because according to the briefing I've gotten from staff, if we do the lining, it's about half the cost than digging up and putting in new RCP. And if you do a concrete lining, the life is 75 years, which is the same as the RCP digging it up. So you get the same life, half the cost. So paying a little upfront now, or paying more upfront than the $250,000 per year, maybe on the order of $1 million a year or $2 million, we can decide that when it comes to budgeting time, would be a good idea. And I think
So within that, only because we just received this when we sat down up here, where does that total amount of every time we get the money add up to on this?
well, to date, this year, we put zero in to proactively either repair or what I think you'd been doing, Jill, and please correct me and speak up. You've been taking that 250 and spending it on refurbishing. Anything you didn't chew up for repair, you use for refurbishing. And we're making small progress, but at that rate, there was an estimate of how many years to get all the way around the entire system. It was decades.
It was a long time, yes.
Yeah.
And we haven't actually been able to be very proactive. All of the funding, and since I've been here in 5 years, we've used it all up and then some on just sinkhole repairs.
Okay. So,
If I could just chime in for 1 second, too. So on the storm drain repairs such as that, we have budget allocated, but then staff actually has to go out and get quotes or bids. So we actually, again, don't know what the price is, but we can go ahead and get multiple quotes to see if we can get the best price as well for the work. So we do that on those type of jobs. We don't necessarily have on-call contractors for that one. So we do shop that around to see if we can get the best price.
Okay.
so you asked where does that show up in here, and for this
Where
is
did that live
this
in
is
this?
the current adopted budget. So
Sure.
it was zero, and it was the whatever account number. Was it CD 25A?
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah. And that would be the one if for next year's budget, starting July 1st through the following June 30th, we could choose to allocate part of that unassigned general fund balance, because that's the uncommitted money that we can use. And that's the reason I asked about the 3.7 million potential up to whatever. I don't know how much we applied for reimbursement, but if we get a check, and it usually takes, if they're going to approve it, it takes about a year, and it's been in about a year. If that money comes back in, let's say it's 3 million, that goes straight back into our general fund, and that unassigned balance goes up by 3 million. And we could turn around and take a portion of that and apply it to getting ahead on repair of some of these things and avoid future $3.7 million. Now, it would take 5 to 10 years of doing that kind of investment, depending on the size of the investment, but $1 million, $2 million a year to get ahead. The number that I have in my mind was somewhere around 10 million to get ahead and catch up on. And this is, in essence, deferred maintenance that we want to get ahead on. So I look at tonight as this 250. We are taking it out of that same unassigned balance but it's actually getting back on track that we didn't do last year that I think I voted for, and there were several others, or at least one other of us up here voted for it at the time, and I don't remember who even, but I think it's something, I'm perfectly good with going for 250 more, and then talking about it in budget, whether we go for even more, depending on what all the other competing uses are for that unassigned general fund balance.
No, I think that answers my question. I was really just trying to make sure I understood where it lived on here until it's spent and where it moves to. Just because there's zero showing when we move money into accounts.
Yeah,
We don't want a slush fund that isn't being paid attention to anywhere. Not that I'm saying there is, but
Yeah.
that.
And I
just
think it's the
oversimplify
available
it.
budget right now. The 93 will add to, if we do this transfer, that'll go up by 250 to 340 something and change, right? And it'll live there, and depending on what kind of objectives we agree to or give to engineering, they may go spend it on preventive maintenance. And we could make that an objective as part of our, as we adopt goals and get ahead of some of these failures.
I think part of what may help with this report as well is the operating budget versus the capital budget. Overall, we cannot spend public funds without a budget appropriation approved by the governing body. And so the operating budget has that within the different departments, and we have the revenue that offsets that. But and then if that's unspent at the end of the year, it's returned back to the fund balance, that goes back into the pool, and then you can reappropriate it. On the capital side, it lives on the project until it's spent on the project or the project's closed. If there's anything left, it goes back to that fund where it originally came from. So that's where what we're doing at mid-year with these project closures is there's some old projects. They've got $53,000 left on it. We're formally requesting to close that project and return it to the general fund, or close that project and return it to whatever fund that originally that cash came from. So it will stay on that project for the life of the project. So that's also why on the report we have the current fiscal year and then the project to date columns to kind of show what was appropriated in the budget talks last year versus what's still sitting on that project.
That's great. I appreciate that explanation. And then reading through here, so I'm looking at, I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly at this point. I'm looking at page 6, our page 6 here in our packet, where it looks at the 24, 25 are in alignment with each other. Revised budget going up, but us on target to hit it from what I see here, from 24 to 25. If I'm wrong there, let me know. But I see down here, like sales tax and certain taxes we rely on are expected to be less. So are we, I assume, and I'm asking just for the purpose of being thorough, I assume that has been taken into account in these numbers I'm reading on the expenditures general fund chart.
That's correct. Fortunately, in other areas of revenue categories, we are expecting to do better, which alleviates the reduction in sales tax projections. So, but we do project revenues to exceed expenditures this fiscal year.
Thank you. Just wanted to be thorough, and I appreciate the explanations.
Absolutely.
You done? Or let me know when you yield.
Just for public's sake, would like the city manager to tell us about the staffing adjustments listed on here, or appropriate counsel.
Yes, thank you. I would like to call up Acting Deputy City Manager Jay Schwarm. She's also in charge of the HR department, as well as Director of Public Works Sylvester Maybury, since those are the departments requesting the reclassifications.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, Mayor and Council, Sylvester Maybury, Public Works. The reclassification for the facilities maintenance supervisor is due to this position manages a division. This position also reports directly to me. And in summary, our facility maintenance division, they're responsible for managing 5 city facilities, which includes the City Hall, the library, our Public Works facility, our community center, and Pacific View, our 6 fire stations, our lifeguard stations, our pedestrian undercrossings, and they're also responsible for maintenance within our 23 parks, which includes all bathrooms, lighting, drinking fountains, showers, and utilities. So the difference is this position functions as a manager. It reports directly to me. It has 3 facility specialists that report to him, and also 1 part-time specialist. So that reclass is bringing them in line with the true job duties that he's performing.
Want to refer to the maintenance? You want to refer to, did you talk fleet as well?
The fleet maintenance position is the same thing. He functions as a division manager. There's 2 heavy equipment mechanics that reports directly to him. We currently have over 120 vehicles that we maintain. We procure all our vehicles. We handle our state requirements as far as reporting and compliance with all the regulations. So this is bringing that position into the proper classification also as a manager.
These 2 positions in Public Works is also a continuum of last year where there were 3 adjustments having to do with supervisors. They were field supervisors who actually conducted work in the field that reported to superintendents. So that was adjusted last year, 3 positions that were moved to 42. These 2 last positions are aligning them. The difference between the ones reporting to the superintendent versus these 2, they run divisions, and they report directly to the director. So this is finishing up the alignment that was started last year. Okay? And then, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
And then as to the HR position, it's a specialist versus an analyst to reflect the conducting of work that is reflective of the position.
I appreciate the explanation. Thank you, and I agree with this. I just want to make sure when we're going over a full budget and there's 3 positions added on at the back, with the public gets worried about seeing things piled on to budgeting questions. So I just wanted to make sure we went over that with transparency to the public to see and highlight what a good job everybody's doing.
Right. Just to clarify, these are not new positions. We are just realigning them to reflect the duties that they do congruent with the positions.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, I'll hop in for one last, I think most of my questions have been answered. On page 15, or I think it's several places, there was a government/education access equipment update where it was actually returning $850,000, which I love the fact. I think that means IT didn't spend money they thought they were going to, or they saved money. It's 850,000. It got up to that threshold that I noticed, well over that threshold. So it's good news. I just wanted to figure out what happened.
So we have a few legacy projects that you can tell by kind of how old the project number is in there. where they were set up as work projects because they would go multiple fiscal years in some of the capital funds. We've found that those technology projects that tend to be more operational in nature, every year it's a little confusing, and they get a little bit of funding from the general fund, and they received a little funding from the public education and access cable franchise fees. So what we're doing as part of this cleanup to have the capital improvement really reflect those capital projects and not have these operational things, and to plan for the technology looking ahead. We've created a technology fund, so this gets that funding back into the franchise fee fund, gets funding for that came from the general fund initially in that technology fund, and then we can do those interfund revenue for those operational things in operations land, not in capital.
So is the
projects.
850, and Jessica, I'll give you a chance to help fill in the blanks too. But first, the 850,000, was that just the general fund portion, going back to the general fund, or does that include also the cable franchise fee going back to its dedicated fund?
It's 100% cable franchise.
Oh, it's 100% cable, so 850,000, wow. Okay.
Yes.
Excuse me, just really quickly to share how that fee and revenue is used, that franchise fee. A good example is the equipment in this room. So anything related to public broadcasting and the capital for that comes out of that fund, but it can only be spent for those needs, and that is why we do have a balance in that fund. So every approximately 5 years, we upgrade this entire area with new equipment. And so that balance stays in preparation for refreshing the equipment.
Okay, and that explains why we basically, if we approve what we're doing tonight, that's 450,000 from unassigned general fund, and we're seeing the adjustment to the unassigned general fund balance dropping by about 500, so an extra 50,000. And had this gone back into the general fund, it would have, but it's going back into a dedicated fund. Okay, great. I appreciate that we're going back and looking at these, I like to call them fallow, like fallow acres, money sitting there. So that kind of takes me naturally to my next question, which is, I'm going to start by asking about earned income, investment income, and where that shows up. And I think we had an investment report late last year, early this, I think late last year, and it showed we were making 3-point-something% on average, because we have to stay in very conservative investments. But the amount of money we were making implied that we had 40-50 million in various funds lying around. And so if you could give me an overview, give us an overview of how much investment income we've gotten, if you have the average rate, and about how much money is that in there.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to the numbers, but I know when we do prepare budgets, we're very conservative with our estimates. But we have seen an increase in revenue from that. Typically, we do end the year, maybe $500,000 over, sometimes $1 million. But in this environment, it's at least the first 6 months of the fiscal year was pretty solid returns. It's difficult to say where we'll end up, but that even the additional amendment is conservative.
Yeah, and as I remember, let's take the cable fund. That money, when it makes money, goes back into the cable fund and only into the cable fund. General fund goes back into the general fund, et cetera. Yeah, so you're
Yes.
nodding yes, thank you.
Yeah, any interest earned is returned to the fund, the funding source. So it's very, very specific in that regard.
So maybe to cut to the chase, I know we have 20 million in reserves by policy. We want to do that. That's how we were able to do things like Surfers Point, because we had the cash. We have another 2 million and 2.3 million, 2.4 million in operating reserve. So they're right there, there's 23 million we're making money on somewhere.
Yes.
We just saw almost $1 million here in the cable. There's another part of that income. How much else is there? Another 10, 20 million out there at various capital projects waiting to be spent?
Yeah, and we do have enterprise funds as well. So you have the Cardiff Sanitation Division, you have the Encinitas Sanitation Division, San Diego Water District. So those, there's, the majority is the general fund. but-
Okay. And so they have their own reserve accounts, very similar in the probably $5 to $10 million range. So not tonight, but for our budgeting workshop, I would like to have an analysis of the, I'll call it money there, what's encumbered in various reserves and any other, large sums of money that are there. What accounts are they in? Are they on some old capital project? Because I think what I learned last year is when we needed roughly $7 million for the North 101 drainage 60-inch pipe, we were able to find it. And I know we had to scrape to do it. I'm just wondering if more scraping might find another 5 to 7 million that could be reallocated to more immediate needs, much like that was. So, and I think that's a task for that, if I could ask staff to be ready with that.
Yes, we will have that prepared. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see anybody else wanting to talk. If nobody wants to talk, I'll entertain a motion.
I just want to start off and thank staff for your time on this. We're getting ready to do budgets and an explanation of did I jump you? I didn't mean to. Oh, no. Okay. So I thank you for your time on this. This is really helpful for us moving forward to see how things live and to dive into what's going on currently as we look forward. I'm going to make a motion to pass, to approve.
Second.
Perfect. And it looks like we'll call the question.
Motion carries unanimously.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
And with that, we'll adjourn this special meeting and we'll come back into the regular meeting at 6 o'clock. Very good. And thank you. I think